I bet.
Tim, hey, thanks for calling in. We're just about to get started.
But I'll wait till you show it to me. Hey, okay. Morning. Brian and Brennan.
That's right.
The Bryan twins.
He's the smart one.
Hey there, how are you?
Good morning.
Got some.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, good looking guy like me. Nice to see you without your helmet so you hear them.
Yeah. Not waking up late shorts.
I have some other meetings today.
Well, it's 8:31, and it's probably time to get started. And we've got people still joining us on the phone, and I'm looking around the room, and it's. I've heard the comment before. Why aren't any females interested in broadband?
They are, you just want to use it.
And I know today, for some reason or another, it struck me as a good question. I have no idea. It's not that we're not reaching out, but it's very interesting.
Maybe it's that we all think we're so smart that we can solve these problems. And it's our male ego that's.
Well, we've got a large female participant, I mean, figuratively.
Well, we
Over
have
at Crown Castle.
Maybe that's why we're,
Yeah.
But anyway, welcome to everybody. Let's go around the room once and then on the phone and do introductions, and we'll take a quick look at the agenda and dive right in. So I'm Bill Simmons and coordinate the Broadband Consortium.
Greg Hayward, Water Einstein.
Kevin Pasasa, City of Oxnard.
Stephen Sawyer, Charter Communications, also known as Spectrum.
Bob Allen, KDTV.com.
Terry Howard, Municipal Broadband.
Andy Sobel, City Council, Santa Paula.
George Amendola, Cyberdynamics.
Cesar Perez, Impulse Advanced Communications.
Sasha Burrows, AmeriCorps, and BCPC.
Brian Shaw, City of Moore Park.
I'm Darren Kettle, I'm with the Ventura County Transportation Commission.
Billboard Falls Economic Development Collaborative.
And on the phone, let's pace ourselves now.
Mike Manchak with San Francisco at Consortium.
Hi, Mike.
Hey, Bill. Tim Williams at Digital West.
Hi, Tim.
Hey there, how are you? Cedar Avenue.
Hader? Anybody else on the phone?
Bill Brennan with Spectrum. Good morning.
Hi, Gil. Anybody else? All right. I think we have a quorum. So, in terms of today, I want to just give you an update on where we're at with our priority areas, CPUC funding, talk a little bit about the follow-on. Bruce Stensley, got a text from him. He had planned on being here today, but he's got some issues keeping him at home this morning, and he'll be in noontime or so. We'll also talk about the municipal roadmap. Somebody just joined us.
Yes, this is Jory.
Hi, Jory. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, everyone.
It's Jory Wolf. I'll put you on our list. We've got a full house, Jory, so we're glad you made it.
Okay. Sorry I wasn't able to be there late night at a conference in San Diego.
Okay. 5G is going to be an interesting discussion for this group, and I'll be interested to hear what everybody has to say, their observations. We're going to talk a little bit about the summit coming up and the theme for that, and then anything else that we have time for. So, as you are aware, that CPUC funding is for priority areas. They've got maps. I've talked about this in the past. I think we have another week or so before the call for proposals is up. We also have another week or so of funding, 2 weeks left for the consortia. There's a whole nother round that is being talked about. There was a meeting this week, and I think I'll get into that. Let me go further. Yeah, this is the, and what's happening, this is the second round that we're completing of funding first round started about 2014, 2015, for a couple of years. There's about 18 consortia statewide. But what's happened is the requirements have evolved quite a bit. What CPUC is doing in this next round is really focusing in on the rural areas. And there'll be a meeting on the 29th, they're gonna talk about it, and we're gonna talk, as a region, we've got 5 reps from our consortia that'll be attending that meeting, and it's very interesting as you look at the scoping statements. Our purpose as a group is to engage regional consortia, local officials, ISPs, stakeholders, to talk about these priority areas and cost-effective strategies to achieve it. But then you move down to the next one, where we are going to assist infrastructure applicants in the project development or grant application process. So the maps are getting very explicit. Our detail and work as a consortia with municipalities is becoming very focused. And then the roles that we have in helping telecommunications companies go after these areas is very, very specific as well in terms of the compensation and focus that we're providing. So this is really all about that 98% mark. We've gotten to the hard part. There are areas and communities, but more importantly, in the outlying areas, that we really do have to wire and get broadband to. And our work as a consortium is to do that. So that's what the funding will be, and for all intents and purposes, this is sole sources. Unless somebody stood up another consortium for Ventura County, we don't anticipate, the funding is pretty much earmarked to come back to the consortium for this time 3 years.
Good work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But that leaves an awful big discussion unfunded, and that we've been having, and we want to continue that dialogue as well. And I'm gonna, as over the next meeting or 2 or 3, we want to talk about that. When you start talking about fiber and incapacity way beyond what the state standards are, we're still a group to do that, and we want to do that. We want to talk about smart cities and smart city development. That's something we've started. It's not something CPUC is interested in from their standpoint in their charter, but certainly we are as a community group. And so we want to talk about that as well. And so how that all starts coming together, the strategies we want to talk about, and the collaboration that we want to foster, will be interesting conversations as we go forward. So, Doc, feedback?
Well, it seems, these goals are congruous to smart cities. It's a byproduct of getting these things done, so you can figure out how to do those hand in hand, right?
Yeah.
But it's nice to be specific and actually have some directives to be able to go after specific things,
Yeah.
so we can start those accomplishments.
The proposal in the past has been a pretty long document. It's been, 40, 50 pages, all kinds of narrative. This time, they've given us a spreadsheet, you fill in the blanks.
And do they have definitions for what infrastructure applications mean? Those kind of things?
Yeah. And I think the definitions are in flux. It was, as I sat in and listened to the phone call a couple days ago, they've invented a term. I've always considered this group an advisory group. They've created a term called board members. And I'm not exactly sure what that was. I was talking to Bruce about it yesterday or the day before, and that is, they want to know who our board members are. And we really don't have board members. The EDC has a board, but they're not part of the consortium. We're just an entity, but they're looking for, and we have stakeholders. Well, what is a stakeholder? Well, it's somebody that collaborates with others. And so I don't know what the term, and all the consortia are asking these questions. We're not structured necessarily with a board of directors. It's kind of a virtual organization for collaboration. We're not a 501c anything. We're just a task force, and we just do what we do the way we do it. And so we're gonna have to really seek clarification from them on what they're looking for in terms of board members. I think they truly do want the municipalities to be engaged. I also think they want the telecoms to be engaged. But board members, to me, from a legalistic standpoint, starts coming up with levels of responsibility and you know, the politics of being a stakeholder in a meaningful financial way, and I don't think that's the intent of this group. And so we're gonna have to peel that onion a little bit as we get into this next round of funding, and exactly what is a board member in terms of what they're looking for. So I'm sure there's lawyers somewhere that have figured out that, you know, there's liability tied to being a board member in an organization, but we're a virtual organization. And we don't have board members per se, but that may be a continuing conversation when we go to this meeting, find out what they're looking for, and then come back and say, well, gee, I like the idea of having advisors and, you know, and having the entities that are collaborating together. It meets all the entities' interests. But to create another organization, the school I came from is, let's keep that to a minimum. Let's work with the organizations we have. So anyway, that's the latest on proposals for CPUC. May 17th is the date, so it's just under a month when we have to get this put together, and I'll be spending some time tomorrow and into next week really putting the first scrub on content for the spreadsheet that they're looking for and putting it together. I want to talk a little bit about municipality roadmap. We rolled this out at our summit a year or two back, and I'm calling this version 1.0. But as we've gotten into conversations with cities like Fillmore and Santa Paula and others, I think we're ready to talk about a version 2.0 and what this means. Sasha has come aboard as our civic park person. One of the first tasks he had was to put together the anchor institutions. He's been working with the GIS department with the county, and they've now got within their GIS system all of these anchor institutions that he's identified. Had some marvelous discussions with Bill Bartels with the city of Fillmore, and we find out that the city has all kinds of assets, as does Santa Paula, as do other cities. And I know Jory's been doing this as well, in terms of the work that he's been doing in Ventura and Oxnard. And it's amazing the assets that are available. It's irrigation pipes, for example. I mean, who would have thought? Oil pipes, who would have thought? You know, pipes that extend down the Santa Clara River, who would have thought? And so, you know, when you talk about dig once, sometimes when you create these inventories, there's a question of whether you need to dig it all. And the idea of creating a library for all of these things, you know, and have each community well aware of these kinds of assets is very important. And so that, you know, when you start taking all of the assets, all the anchor institutions, that was the first drawing, and then all of these assets that are different channels in which you might be able to connect the anchor institutions, you create this foundation to actually start building your community network. And that's, I think, the new municipality roadmap we're talking about. It's really looking at this and looking at that, and you can do it, you know, through Magellan. I think for smaller cities, you know, this is a best practice that you can follow, you know, in the footsteps of others and do it as well. You know, it really is a fundamental conversation to get to the next point of establishing your community network and having these outcomes. And then eventually, as we do this collectively through this collaborative effort of ours, we're gonna have to talk about governance. We're gonna have to talk about how do you manage, how do you get economies of scale with the municipalities working together. We've had discussions in the city of Oxnard and elsewhere about, you know, ISPs and you know, connecting organizations and anchor institutions. Do you want to have one connection, or do we have 11 connections for each of the 10 cities in the county? Now that's kind of an extreme, but yet it's an important conversation that we have. And I think we know the answer, but we just have got to figure out the organization and the mechanisms by which we can do this. And I think we're approaching, in this next several year or two, you know, this new conversation. And we've been working on it, we've been getting very focused, and I think we're right on the precipice of moving forward. So, let me see. One of the things is Sasha and I talked to the county and the GIS department, we started putting together words for a charter. Now this is, it's still malleable, it's still taking shape, but the whole GIS portion of an online location to archive, compare, and contrast maps of fiber shared among partners. The ability to assign fiber assets as well as dark fiber that currently exists is not used. A topology for community networks created through the connection of anchor institutions. How we all do this is a discussion. You know, I think we see the picture now, we haven't figured out, and we know what the what is gonna look like, we don't know how the how is gonna work yet, but we're getting there. So it's really kind of exciting to see the direction we're going and what's taking shape. Comments, anybody? I've been talking a lot.
Bill, good morning. So I've been trying to work through a lot of these issues on our own in our company for a number of years. We've had some successes, we've had a lot of failures. The failures have been really in lack of understanding by the stakeholders what's at stake. And I hate to use the word lack of cooperation, but they didn't see the value. And so many times, you know, they didn't see the vision and we couldn't get what we were trying to do done. In California, we have, you know, the CPUC, they have carriers, they have tariffs, they have lots of things that come into play. And now they're letting consortiums like us try to fill out the areas that those carriers have not been interested in doing in the past. And in some cases, the carriers have woke up and jumped in a lot of cases, that's not the case. But what I'm trying to say here is that, you know, we talk about assets, you know, there's a huge amount of assets, no one can have a question with that, but the core assets are really the ones, you know, the crown castles, the spectrums, the frontiers, you know, they go to these places, they for the most part. It's just a matter of, you know, getting them to, you know, cooperate with us, you know. And I'm not saying they haven't shown cooperation, but what I'm trying to say is they're a for-profit business and we have to respect that. And we're, you know, trying to get something done for our community to build the future and build out the future and take care of the citizens that will be sitting here 100 years from now. And so that's one statement. It's about cooperation, you know, with all. I suspect we won't have a lot of problems from the industries that could take advantage of our efforts, but where I do suspect we're gonna have problems are of a sort is from the for-profit entities. I sat here a few times and said, you know, where's Frontier? Where's Verizon? You know, where are people who, you know, have assets here? And, you know, they want to hear what we're doing, but they don't want to jump in and say, hey, I can help you with that. You know, I mean, I'm not saying, no disrespect, you're sitting here, thank you, okay? But, you know, the core problem is that, you know, we have two different points of view. One is to get it done, not having a mindset on profit, but having a mindset on improvement, and the other is a mindset on profit. And improvement comes along the way, hey, that's great, but it's about profit. So I don't know how we solve that problem. I haven't been able to do it. You know, I'm sure Jory's run into this as well, you know, in his travels, it's just natural. I just came back from a conference in Las Vegas all week, carriers, and, you know, here we are. You know, this is the thing. You know that. But when you talk to them about fiber, you know, the interest isn't really as strong as it used to be. You know, they're more about radio, you know, RF now. So we're on the right track, and thank you for that, just to get the discussion going. But the other, I've worked also with a lot of situations where you use abandoned pipelines in the past, mainly oil company pipelines. And it's very doable. There's a lot of networks in an oil country that actually survive there. In Europe, they survive in all kinds of pipes that are there, so we know that can be done. But it's not an easy task, because cooperation. You gotta have a lot of people working with each other to get to the end. And that is where, you know, the secret sauce is to get, you know, you go to talk to the water company, you go to talk to the gas company, and it's like, okay, so who in this department can I talk to who's got the authority to actually work with me? You know, things like that. So that's a whole other journey. So
Well, and we're kind of at the tip of the spear. The people doing the heavy lifting are the Bryans and the Bryans, you know, the Kevins. I mean, what's happening in each of the, we're talking a regional situation, but when you get into the municipalities, that's really where the heavy work is occurring. This is a shifting landscape. Yeah, and what your observations are accurate in that there is the old way and there is the new way that we're evolving towards. I'm not sure anybody's got a firm picture on it yet. But yeah, it is a very transitionary time. And I don't know if it's gonna have a future state or whether it's gonna continue to evolve. But you're absolutely correct. The roles are changing and the landscape is changing.
And I think that's what the summit is really gonna strive to do, is get as many people that we can in that room and educate them as to what we're trying to accomplish and how they can participate, you know?
I've got a slide coming up and we won't spend a lot of, I mean, 5G is the next one coming up and I think we'll spend a lot of time there. But the summit, I think we've got a consensus now that our theme is gonna be about the fourth utility. And what does that look like? How does that deliver? I don't think we know yet, you know, but I do think we know it's coming. And so that's gonna make for an interesting conversation. And I don't think there's go ahead.
I think now is a really good time for us to realize that there's a lot of interest in broadband, and it's not just coming from municipalities, but it's coming from the investors. So the investors are looking at the race to own property and become property owners of poles, vertical assets, get conduit and fiber in the ground during encroachment activities, to be able to respond to, well, right now, a lot of hype around 5G, but eventually what will come from 5G and what will come from 6G. So this is really now, with all of this stirring up the pot, there's a great deal of interest in owning the landscape. And in owning the landscape, the investors' interest in owning the landscape, I believe municipalities can take advantage and try to establish firm partnerships with the investors to help facilitate the expansion of broadband within their communities and within the region. In terms of abandonment of assets, Ventura's done a really good job so far, the city of Ventura, of acquiring 3 gas lines that are being abandoned that run right, one in particular runs right through the middle of town, and is part of their master plan process for delivering fiber into the downtown and connecting both east and west portions of that community. The same is true in other communities with Huntington Beach, with the abandonment of oil pipelines and the like. So there is, so to speak, oil or gold underground that can be tapped, and many communities are doing that. And of course, we need to look at abandoned assets, but we also need to look at public assets. One of the things that has not happened in the past is that there's been no partnership between the public sector and the private sector in investing in broadband. And so with the investors racing to own property and to get conduit and fiber in the ground, again, this is a good time for the public sector to wake up and for cities and counties to realize we have assets too, and we should entice them to build here. So using our assets, we can lower the price, and at the same time, we should be able to get something in exchange. For example, I'm talking to a number of companies in the Ventura County area already. So I'm not going to quite name names yet, but 2 of them, 5, have already expressed an interest in lowering the costs to provision broadband within to governments and to cities and the county at a discounted wholesale rate because of the opportunities for new customers from the private sector businesses. So that kind of thinking and the use of public assets is, I believe, going to help move this paradigm further than it has before. Again, it will require governments to engage and to understand that they have a new role in this.
That's great news. Thanks for that, Jory. Other thoughts? Probably a good time if anybody from the municipality wants to throw in any update in terms of where we're at or what's going on before we move on to the 5G discussion. Any quick updates of where we're at? No?
The FCC declaratory ruling, which is forcing, in essence, local governments, counties, etc., to fast track participation with tower build-outs for 5G. It's largely bypassing the California Public Utilities Commission and the rule of law locally. So it's going to be interesting to see how this shakes out. Ventura has decided to pass some local regulation, or attempt to, in the near term, to confront that. Yet to be determined how effective that will be. I'm curious, what Oxnard is doing, what Santa Paula is doing, what Fillmore is doing. I haven't been able to find a lot of information what the county is doing. It's concerning because of the way the FCC is mandating this, and they put in this shot clock system, which if the cities or the municipalities or the counties don't respond to the applications within a certain time frame, then by default the carriers can go ahead and deploy. So it's a little concerning to me as a resident. I'm just wondering what the other cities are doing. I'm up to speed on Ventura.
I can speak to that a little bit. I know Moore Park, Simi Valley, Thousand Oaks, I believe Camarillo also all did the same thing as Ventura. And there is a joint concern among all of the municipalities over the erosion of local control. So what we're trying to avoid is, I heard it last night at our council meeting, that I don't want, a 5G site 20 feet from my bedroom or in front of my house in the middle of my neighborhood. I understand that. The federal framework of law between the FCC and other past legislation is we cannot take, RF frequencies or any of the, those effects into consideration, period. It's simply against the law for us to do that. So in the absence of doing anything, there's no regulation, the Wild West essentially out there. So what local agencies are doing is trying to, as much as the law and the regulation the FCC will allow, outline a process and saying, hey, if you want to go into a residential street in front of homes, you have to first demonstrate to the city that there's not one in a commercial zone, or there's not maybe a residential zone open space that's 100 feet away. That would make more sense. So it's kind of the last resort is the homes, and that was the big push for what we were all doing. The reality is that there's a bunch of lawsuits and challenges against the FCC rule that are just going to play out, and I'm sure some of them will be won and some of them will be lost. There will be changes to the regulatory the environment that we're in. So we're all going to need to change these to comply with whatever court case or new law comes in. But it is concerning to us, and we're doing what we can, but it is what it is.
Right. And the cities are bound together. What's that? What do they refer to that as?
The League of Cities.
League of Cities.
California League of Cities, National League of Cities.
Right.
Yeah, we signed on to that particular one of many letters that went into the FCC. There's also legislation in the House federally to just, it's the shortest federal bill I've ever seen. It just says, FCC order number blah is hereby repealed. Like that's the whole, law.
Here's
but it's stalled.
And that's great. I really appreciate hearing that information. The concern I have, again, and this is me as an individual, and also having a long career in telecommunications and recognizing that the majority of the telecommunications business has been built on lawsuits. I view Ventura, the city of Ventura, being entirely too passive about their approach to this. I don't know if this is kind of a theme within the county or the tri-county area. We just don't know the effects of this, and once the carriers deploy the infrastructure, we're stuck with it. So while they're trying to figure out how to play this locally, if they miss the shot clocks, the carriers are gonna build. The infrastructure is largely there on the backbones, with AT&T, Spectrum, Verizon. So they're ready to roll, even with Crown Castle. The sooner they can deploy this, going back to what Terry said about the ROI models and trying to monetize, the sooner they can deploy these, then they have instant monetization on the backbone network. So they're keen to do this as quickly as they can. But once it's in, we're stuck with it.
Yeah.
Bill?
Yes.
Quick comment.
I have a comment to make. I don't know if you were aware of this, but there's a bill that's being floated in California in the legislature by AT&T and Comcast. And the bill is basically going to eliminate any new ISPs or actually eliminate cities and state and the state and counties from regulating anything related to IP, including anything in the public right of way, anything pertaining to disclosure of maps and information pertaining to the public right of way, banning of anti-competitive contracts of any kind, and expansion of any pole or conduit access and like so. The deadline for opposition was day before yesterday. This is a pretty serious offense to municipal broadband, and we have to make sure that this particular bill in our state does not pass. And now is the time that I think we all need to act to put this thing to bed before it makes any headway in the legislature.
Is that Jory talking?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Jory. What's the bill number or name? Do you know?
It's AB 1366. I can send this to Bill, and Bill can send it out to everybody.
Please do. Darren, did you want to throw something into the mix?
It's a little bit off the 5G conversation. Just again, my name is Darren Kettle. I'm the executive director of the Ventura County Transportation Commission. And we are a small part of one of the recent summits where transportation sort of got brought into the whole conversation. I will be the first to say that I am the most novice when it comes to broadband in this room, and arguably in all of Ventura County. But one of the things that's kind of funny is that your fourth utility on broadband and transportation always thought it was the fourth utility, so I'm trying not to take offense to the fourth utility.
You're gonna have broadband in your buses.
Well, that exactly do. Hey, all my big blue buses all have all our Wi-Fi, so they can't be wired. That would make it a little tough, but they wouldn't get very far. Or really long wires.
We still have drivers.
Yes, exactly. For the time being, we do still have drivers. Give us about 15, 20 years, don't know. But one of the things that I wanted to touch on that you're talking about on the governance issue is there's something very similar that happened in the transportation world. It started in Southern California in the 70s, where generally speaking, from a statewide perspective, Caltrans did everything. I think most everybody knows that, but it was in the 70s that county transportation commissions were started to be formed. In Ventura County, we were way behind the rest of the region, in that we were not formed until 1989, and that we were really either beholden to Caltrans or to SCAG in downtown Los Angeles. So as you talk about the governance issues, there is that element about how do you form that governance structure, and because if it is going to be some form of utility, whether it's the 3 or the 4th or the 5th, there is that probable reality of where do you bring local governments together to move things forward. And I have a few commissioners who have been engaged on that, with, from both the county side as well as the city side. So there's a recognition that what broadband is all about, the assets that transportation brings is part of the conversation. But there is some history about how it has happened in the state from a way that governance has been formed, and again, it was just more of an example of this happened 45 years ago from a transportation perspective, and you're wrestling with it now.
Today. Well, I thank you for being here. I mean, there is an alignment between the two. And we'd like to think that when it comes to autonomous vehicles, broadband will be powering them. So maybe we'll just share that for the utilities fund.
That's fine. We're all in this together.
Yeah, but thank you for being here. I mean, it is a good metaphor, analogy. I think we're following the same path.
And then specifically in regards to this bill, excuse me, does the consortium take a political stance and put a statement out or lobby with anybody?
Well, I think that's where we're going next in terms of the discussion, and I think we can at this point spend some time talking about 5G.
I spoke to our representative, Jackie Irwin, about this. She's quite knowledgeable in what we're doing. And she said that her belief is it will not pass.
Right.
She will vote against it. She said it's, a lot of things are coming through now. They passed 1,100 bills last year. Can you imagine trying to do that? So, they're just throwing stuff out there. Yeah. So, we have a good representative. She understands this.
So I want to.
Bill?
Yeah.
I just want to say Santa Paula is also looking at passing an ordinance, so we'll do that soon.
Yeah. I want to tee this up and then just let the conversation fly. A lot of people have been talking about 5G, and they've been wanting to know what is the consortium's role in this, and I think that I don't have the answer to that question right now, but I think we are looking for an answer. Clearly, I think the first time this a month or so ago when this really started acting up, maybe 2 months at this point. I was happy to be able to say, well, we're all about broadband, and at least we're all arguing about what color of broadband we're talking about at this point. Nobody's arguing about broadband, but now the color of broadband. I don't think that's a good enough answer at this point. It's not enough just to say, well, we're really all about as a consortium fiber. 5G is going to need the backhaul, and so we're going to be supportive of that as well. When you have, this is something I found on the website that is, that everybody's dealing with in terms of the opposition to 5G. It's research, academia, everybody's running around with their hair on fire. And it, how many, 14 different, 16 different symptoms now from, exposure to RF. I mean, and this is what is happening and what people are talking about in the city, and it's just the sky is falling. And yet, I went this weekend with my kids and grandkids to Disneyland, and this is my cell phone right here. And I took a screenshot, and there it said, 5G. I mean, it's the first time I've ever seen it on my phone. 5G is here. And my phone lit up and said 5G. And so, ready or not, it's coming. And it's here, and it's happening because my phone reacted to it.
We installed a 5G link yesterday in Oxnard.
Yeah.
From the mountain to the top of the tire shop. Under an FCC license, they reduced their broadband bill by 50% and got 100 times more data.
So, in teeing it up, these are the questions. What is going on here in terms of all that we're hearing and seeing and experiencing? But how does the consortium respond? And what are the implications of all this? Because we do have to move forward, and we are locked on this direction as a smart city. And my big concern, having been a student and observer politics forever, is I don't want to get sidelined. I think we have to figure out. There is a landmine here, politically speaking, and we have to diffuse it, walk around it, figure out how to get by it, because where we're going is much bigger than just getting stuck in a 5G quagmire. And that's why my first inclination was to avoid it, but I don't think we can. So with that, you know, there's a lot of people with interest and thoughts about this whole conversation, and I'm more than interested in hearing what you think a consortium could or should be doing to at least help people get on the same page and work through this.
Education.
Bill, this is Mike Manchuk in San Luis Obispo. And, you know, I think I've expressed way back when we first started going into the consortium that, you know, what are we really focusing on? What are we trying to do? Way before 5G ever came, you know, into the vernacular. Fast forward, I can't see us fighting the utilities and what they want to. However, I am concerned and have been concerned that, you know, this could derail some momentum that this consortium could have for a couple of reasons, I think. One of which is, even yesterday on the radio up here in San Luis, was, you know, people barking about 5G. Now, I think the challenge here for us on top of this is how we separate the consortium and what we're trying to accomplish with fiber, as opposed to people being confused with what it is that we're doing, and then block us from doing it. Because the utilities are also saying, you know, oh yeah, we're using fiber and we're using this for 5G, and then all of a sudden we get swept up into that, and then we go backwards in terms of the progress the consortium's making. So I don't want to just throw that out there, but I think it is a legitimate threat if we don't handle this right as a consortium, to the consortium.
So, 5G. Who in the room believes 5G is going to be available commercially and widespread within the next 5 years?
How about the next 6 months?
Yeah, I see a number of people are nodding yes, it will be.
Yeah.
A lot of
and
people.
this is Mike who just spoke, and I would agree with that. I mean, it's coming.
Experts disagree on this, with you on this topic, I'm sorry. But what we're seeing is 5G, a lot of talk about 5G. 5G is, first of all, there are no standards for 5G. Second of all, other than Motorola, and not too many people have a Motorola phone, there are no phones that are currently on the market that support 5G. There are plans to start rolling out 5G phones within the next year. But the cities that are being approached by the 5G wireless carriers are being approached with permits for 4G. The idea here, again, is that they are attempting to get rights to poles, streetlight poles, and to traffic signal poles, so that they will secure their rights to be able to deploy 5G in large numbers, because they need to be densely placed and about 850 feet apart. So I have not yet spoken to anyone in Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, or Sprint who has caught that they are installing 5G now. There are some 5G prototypes that have been installed in the city of Los Angeles and about 5 other cities nationwide, but they aren't being commercially used, and there's no one that can use them on their phones. The phones won't support it. And so the question, the question is, when is 5G coming? And I think everyone believes that 5G is coming very quickly because the industry wants us to believe that. The industry, especially Verizon and AT&T, that are banking a lot of their future on wireless and 5G to be able to support high bandwidth within communities. They don't want new investors to invest in fiber. They don't want fiber to the home to compete. And so they're saying that 5G is coming sooner, and this is, of course, my opinion and several other experts in the field, that it's coming sooner than it really actually is. I don't the expense, because fiber has to be deployed to every 5G small cell site. And, or maybe we will in 20 years from now. But 5G is not going to be the answer to everything that they're making it out to be.
But one comment on that.
Yeah,
I just have
go ahead, Mike, and I'll.
But just quick question, this really good information, thank you so much. Is that, reading between the lines, is that, in the way that the economy is coming back, is that a way to kind of get the fiber folks to say, oh, I guess we should back off because it's either us or them? Is that what I'm hearing, or what's your sense of that? Okay, got it.
It is, yeah, and so it's getting, I mean, those carriers that don't have a wireless market niche, or aren't in the wireless market niche, are trying to figure out how to get there. So what did Time Warner do, and now what did Spectrum do? They've got a wireless solution, right? So instead of them building out fiber, they're all moving to wireless, and because they think that that's the new area that they've got to compete. We're seeing less entrance, commercial investments, I should say, from the incumbents and other private sector carriers installing fiber, except for deployment of 5G. So yeah, it's working. They're going to dominate the future marketplace on this type of 5G is coming, and it's coming tomorrow. But there are no standards, and there are no phones, and every incumbent I speak to, they are not installing 5G. They are telling you or making you believe that they are. But I just spoke to Verizon yesterday, and we're talking about
that's marketing.
Yes.
A number of things, but they are not installing 5G. They are.
Can I interrupt for a second? Okay. You know, every time I hear about 5G, I hear the combination of wireless and direct, for industry, okay? We have 5G in Silicon Valley, don't we? We have 5G in Silicon Beach, don't we? Why don't we have Silicon?
No, I don't believe we do yet.
Well, let's put it this way, it's set up to be able to do it because they're looking for more than just what 5G can do for business. It attracts business in, which attracts money into our community.
But it's sort of the same paradigm as televisions. They have televisions now that can work at a certain DPI rate, but nothing can support that to have it in your home. So it's a catch-22.
The technology is here, the infrastructure is not.
So we have to build the infrastructure, but I don't hear anybody talking about building the infrastructure to create an environment to bring new businesses in here that need that infrastructure. It seems like all we're doing is putting Band-Aids on solutions instead of knocking the thing down and let's go do it. Look at the city of Oxnard. I'm sorry.
Well, cities do have infrastructure. You guys, the whole purpose of Bill and Tosh putting together the database of assets is to show that you guys do have assets, and that the cities and the county do have assets that can be used for running fiber and for deploying wireless. And when we talk about broadband, we shouldn't just talk about fiber, because it's going to be a combination. The county solution is going to be a combination of both. And we're seeing it in Paso Robles. We're installing, they are installing both fiber in the downtown and fiber to key locations and to arterials over the next 3 to 5 years. But in the interim, they're going to be deploying wireless so that the residents have access to better broadband than they had before. Same thing is happening in the city of San Leandro. San Leandro has a good partner in San Leandro, and they have an abundance of fiber, but they can't get into the residential market, so they're augmenting their fiber services in the commercial corridors with wireless for the residential neighborhoods. So it's going to be a combination of two. So just make sure that you all don't think that if we don't get fiber in the ground, you know, in a great abundance of fiber to the premise for every premise, that it's, you know, we're not going to accomplish our goals. We will with a lot of fiber, but it doesn't have to be to every premise.
So just to
Hey, just a
recap,
quick question, technical question. When Bill sees that 5G on his phone, does that just mean he's recognizing the network, but he can't use it? Is that right?
That's correct. That's
Yeah.
correct.
Okay.
And
Somebody said earlier in this conversation that they installed 5G and they're getting 100 times faster.
Yes.
From a hilltop to a
Yes.
business, that's not 5G.
Well, it's a combination of spectrum.
Well, it's not 5G.
So I was with the head of,
It's licensed for 5G.
I was with the head of T-Mobile IoT and MTM yesterday, nationwide, and he told me T-Mobile will be emphasizing their 600 megahertz network, doing 4G plus from the tower.
Yes.
Whereas the head of Verizon said, we're moving very fast and with actual 5G millimeter wave technology. That was yesterday. Last week at the Ventura City Council meeting, Ventura City Council Public Works, interim Public Works Director said they expect to have 750 small cell applications within the next 2 years. 750 in Ventura.
And that's it. That's exactly what's happening. Everyone assumes because it's small cell, it's 5G.
so if I can
I mean,
recap just
the Verizon
to
rep
tie
I
this
talked to
back to
yesterday
Bill's,
was laughing about just that.
so if I can tie this to Bill's actual question, I think we can all agree that the pursuit of getting access to the public and to the business community is ultimately the goal. It'll be a combination of the fiber effort as well as a 5G effort, if and when it ever comes. We should be pursuing both of those avenues to get to the goal. They're not mutually exclusive. And then Bill's question is, if we bring in this group into the realm of promoting 5G as well, it comes with a lot of baggage of people with health concerns, an anti-lobbying effort. Is it worth it? That's your actual question.
That's my actual question. I feel like this is one of those beer commercials where it tastes great, less film. Well, I mean, we're all heading in the same direction, and we all want to get there together, and we all know where that is, and what it, you know. But at the same time, this is a distraction.
So I don't know if Hader can answer this, and I feel guilty putting on the spot.
Again, I think it's a good distraction, Bill. I mean, actually, it's not a distraction. It's, again, like I said earlier, this is a time when the industry is trying to get access to property. So what was the FCC ruling all about? It was privatizing public assets, right?
Yep.
And so they need to have those access to the public assets because they're going to install these 5G small cells every 800 feet. And so they want to, of course, make good use of these assets before 5G comes out. So they're deploying 4G in a much bigger way because the demand is a lot greater. But also keep in mind that they're only installing all these small cells in densely used areas. So they're not applying for permits in residential neighborhoods. They're looking to see where the smartphones are, where the cell phone usage is, and where the data usage is, and that's where they're going to be deploying 4G now. So these small cell permits that we're seeing are for 4G to meet the demands that is ever increasing because of the proliferation of mobile devices and readying for 5G. Verizon says, quote unquote, as of last week, we have plans to install 5G in 30 cities in the state of California over the next 5 years. We don't have plans to do any more than that. And the cities that they're deploying in are large cities. I don't think my city of Calabasas is going to get 5G in 5 years. It's going to be San Jose, San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego, probably Long Beach, and cities with large population centers and very active downtown.
Yeah.
That's just the way it was, you know, when they put in 2G.
Look, Brian, you had a comment you wanted to
Yeah, I
make.
just wanted to ask if he was there. Hader, because you guys actually had to deal with a bunch of folks coming in while you were having this discussion and go down that health road. Did Thousand Oaks have kind of a talking point or a strategy to deal with that, and did it work?
Well, right now, it's just the reaction to the idea of 5G coming to Thousand Oaks. So, the city council and staff just reacting to all the comments that we hear from residents about, of course, the environmental health impact more than anything else. So, we're just reacting to what's going on. And we have a consultant working with us on that. They keep saying there's gonna be hundreds and hundreds of applications coming in for 5G. That's what we hear from the providers, but we haven't seen anything yet.
Yeah, there's this misunderstanding that hundreds and hundreds of applications are coming in or gonna come in soon for 5G. They are not gonna be deploying 5G for quite some time. This is all for 4G. And these permits are gonna be, you'll see, they're gonna be in areas where there's a lot of data usage. And so it'll be shopping centers or malls, entertainment venues, downtowns, maybe some key stadiums or parks and things of that sort. You'll see when the permits come in, that's what it's gonna look like.
But the element here is, once these deployments are in place, it's just a network upgrade. It is that simple. It's not necessarily about the 5G deployment, it's about the infrastructure's in place and we're gonna swap the gear out. That's how it's gonna roll.
Yeah. They're putting in 4G, I think they call it -U, which is the upgrade, that's what I heard from Sprint.
Yeah. Well, I think we all agree that the network is what we're about as a consortium. I mean, we really do, regardless of the technology, for that last mile or whatever, we really are looking for the capacity of the network, the community network.
Yeah, so, maybe we should say that there's really two types of needed here. One would be 5G cellular. That also is associated with the milliband that goes on the lampposts or some kind of pole. And then there's point-to-point, private antenna to antenna. So the deployments that we're making right now is with a product called Siklu out of Israel. It is 5G. It is a cocktail of several different bandwidths at the same time. It does have a distance of 14 miles, and it's widely deployed. Their company calls it 5G, but it is a cocktail. It works very well. But that's point to point. It's not sitting on a lamppost, that's not sitting in a community, that's going from a rooftop of in the case of Oxnard, a tire company that the best they could get was DSL for the last 30 years, and they're 2 blocks from the Verizon POP, or where POP owns that now, and up to the mountain. They're thrilled for $100.
But 5G is more of a mesh, right?
Right, exactly. It's a mesh, and that's the question, is where does the elevation of that mesh exist over the residences, over the individual people? And the concept is that the mesh is needed for the IoT.
No, it's not mesh technically, but
5G is not mesh.
It's used in
doesn't cover.
right.
Doesn't cover.
It's used in a mesh. It in itself is not a mesh.
All it covers 800 feet. 5G does not.
In that pattern, yes, that's right. The antennas that go on the lampposts, yeah, they have to be 800 feet apart.
Yeah.
We're all concerned about that.
Yeah.
For many aspects.
To Jory's point, and I've seen write-ups, Mike Pettit's written extensively on it as well, from a regional education standpoint. We're gonna have to go through pilots, We don't know what we don't know in terms of new technology implementation. Mike has got, he says the physics has not been proven, in terms of the spectrum and the scalability of this technology. We know this technology, it will deliver, but it may only deliver one. I mean, when you start getting entire neighborhoods and starting to scale capacity, we haven't seen how that works yet. We don't understand it just yet. And that's part of the learning curve that is still going ahead. You know, I just don't wanna, this whole conversation is the conversation that I don't wanna have. I wanna have it this meeting, but I don't wanna have it next meeting, and next meeting, and next meeting, and next meeting, because that's not what I think it's an important one to have, but we've gotta figure out how we're going to get around it and keep doing what we do. And I think one of the key things that I've gotten out of this is reinforcement, revalidation of our whole community network push.
Yeah.
You know, and it's one that everybody's gonna participate in, and everybody's gonna provide, and it's going to be open. You know, because 5G is gonna need it. But to get in there right now with all these people with their hair on fire and try to beat them back is not a good use of our time and energy.
Isn't that what the definition of a consortium is?
Yes. That, and I just stated my opinion, and you know, the conversation's not over yet, but you know, that's where I'm.
I think you're right, we just spend all our time on this,
Yeah.
and we're dependent on law, and we're dependent on service providers.
And learning.
You know, and what are we gonna do, okay? We're trying to solve a problem, and that is change the economics of the communities that we all live in, and get some decent broadband for the kids that don't have it, and get, you know, make it more inhabitable by businesses instead of losing them to places they can get the broadband that they need for their business. That's our, I think, our core objective.
Jory, you tried to jump in again.
Well, my suggestion is, I mean, it seems to me that we all need some education on 5G. And, you know, let's get more than just a couple of voices. Let's get the industry to come and talk about what their plans are for 5G, and let them tell us, and then let us, and give us the opportunity to ask them questions. And we'll get, I think, a good answer. I can tell you though, 5G shouldn't put any of our plans on hold. If anything, 5G is just a wake-up call, because it presents new opportunities for the public sector to engage with the private sector companies. And instead of just trying to be regulators like we were in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, we should be partners. And we should be attempting to offer up our resources to facilitate improvements in wireless technologies in our communities. And as we do that, others will invest, and they'll put, you have to have fiber to backhaul 5G or 4G, either one, and we'll get fiber in our communities at the same time. That's a good thing. So when Verizon says, yes, we'll build shadow conduit for you because you'll expedite our permitting process, and we'll be able to get our fiber in for our 4G that we're deploying within the next 6 months. That's a good thing for us, it's a good thing for you. And I'm doing this with about 6 cities right now. So all I can say is, don't stop your plans. Think about what the role of 4G and 5G will be for you. But think still, fiber is necessary, and that we're gonna have a fiber middle mile network within Ventura County that connects all the cities. Within the cities, we will probably need a combination of fiber and large fiber count, especially in metro areas and commercial zones. And then we'll be augmenting that with 4G and then with 5G when it's available. So my point is that it's not for us to understand how to deploy 5G, because we're not going to be deploying 5G. It's for us to understand how we can make good use of partnering with the industry as they deploy this new telecommunications technology within our communities and within the region, so that we get as much as we possibly can, and we get it for the uses that we intend to use it for.
Well said.
Yeah.
I sort of agree.
Yeah, well said.
But I think it comes down to the political discussion, and then how the municipalities approach the FCC declaratory ruling. If we're just gonna roll over on that, then absolutely yes.
Well, and what can we do? I think before we even got into this conversation, the comments about this AB number.
Right.
Clearly, that is something that could have an impact on the community networks that we're talking about.
But that's a California.
Yeah.
Right, that's specific to California. And then the way the FCC is, written the rule is they've discounted the role of the California Public Utilities Commission. So then it becomes a court challenge. But I'm unsure if our cities are prepared to fight that battle individually, whereas it's my understanding they're gonna rely on the League of Cities to kind of carry and wave that flag.
Well, that's the point of the League of
Right,
Cities.
exactly.
I don't have an attorney on staff.
Right.
So I contribute money to a big entity that has the weight of hundreds of cities to
Right.
do the lobbying and do the legal action for us.
It's
Well,
a bigger
I can
issue.
tell you that the league and the CPUC are not in a position that they're not gonna take a position, to either, support or to fight. They're gonna stay neutral as they have been.
Right.
First of all, the CPUC can't, because they need to be an independent third party to rule on minutia. And the National League of Cities and the California League of Cities has rolled over and said, well, there are members that think this is a good thing, and there are members that think that this is not such a good thing. But this is a matter of something that should be dealt with in the courts, and it's not something that we should deal with politically. So I think there are other sources to fight the fight if that's what you want to do. But in my opinion, it's not to prohibit or to keep or to inhibit the deployment of fiber and 4G and 5G wireless technologies. It's just a matter of making sure that we get our just desserts and that they don't take public property away from us to do that, because that's our leverage to be able to really partner with them and to get something in-kind services or technologies, and that's something that we need to protect.
The league is pushing back on what you're talking about.
So Bill, one other part of this I wanted to check for us is the fact that most, in the future 5G, whatever it shall be, one of the main assets it's going to work with are the street light, the street posts, lamp posts, whatever you want to call it. Primarily those are owned by the utilities in most cities. And there was the option a couple of years ago for some cities to buy those posts. Moore Park and Simi took advantage of it, most cities did not. Jory talked about, re-engaging the cities to try to do that, but in the middle, we had the Thomas fire and the Malibu fire, or Woolsey fire, I guess you call it. And, from all indications, our utility is in bankruptcy mode, as PG&E are already bankruptcy. So my concern is, having said that, is in the end, with referees and bankruptcies, who's gonna own these posts? Are they gonna sell it? I mean, I'm not trying to say this is something I desire, but are they gonna come out as whole as they went into the bankruptcy, or are they gonna take these assets? You have a lot of valuable assets, utilities, you just slice them up to get some of the money back that they need to pay the claimants, and the shortage of the insurance. There's a big question here. It'll take a long time to ferret out, and then in the meantime, they own those poles, so the city doesn't have the right to really, they could permit someone to put something attached to a pole, but they don't own the pole. So these are all things that I don't hear any conversation about that are right in front of us. And I try to get some information from some friends I have at PG&E who work in the telecom side, and their response to me was, you raised some great issues. We've never thought about those issues. They're worked it, I'm not saying they're leadership, but they're, people who work it every day. Yeah.
Is Keith in the room?
No.
Is anyone from Oxnard in the room? Mike Schaefer or Kevin?
Kevin's here.
Any thoughts on that, Jory?
Well, I don't want to speak for Oxnard per se, but I can say we brought this up in other meetings with you all. Keith has done a real good job of putting together memos and is actively engaged in conversations with PG&E, and they are attempting to reopen that program, or at least to be able to get Edison to sell Oxnard their poles. So there has been many discussions with a nonprofit group with House Law, the streetlight pole organization that helped get the 48 cities that did acquire their poles from Edison before the program was shut down in August of 2015. And their movement efforts were still working on it, but we are still hopeful that something will come of it.
Isn't there the jeopardy that buying those poles will result in the FCC being able to acquire those poles once they are purchased, and the city will be out all that money?
Who's gonna purchase it? The FCC?
Well, if the cities purchase it and this ruling goes through that allows them to just do an eminent domain kind of thing.
Well, it's not that we're buying the poles, and we should own them in about 2 months.
Okay.
And we already, to answer your question, we already have talked to AT&T, and they're just waiting for, so to speak, the escrow to close. We've got applications coming in.
Yeah.
They can't add anything while we're in escrow on the poles.
Yeah.
But it's not, the FCC is not taking control of the poles, it's they're limiting what we can do with them.
Okay.
So for example, the rent, so to speak, that we can charge is capped at $270 a year, which is well below the market rate, so to speak, so we get less benefit.
Thank you.
Yeah, the object presented by the power companies to buy these poles was not to start with the attachments. It was to start with, to put LED lighting up there, and, you know, they lower your bill. And there was like a 5-year ROI or something like that. And, you know, that was good business for those who had the cash. They had the cash where, you know, so some could do it, some could not. All this other stuff came later, you know, all of it. That's why the cities are looking back now, like Oxnard, say, oh, you know, maybe we should have done that. But the guys in Oxnard weren't there then, so they couldn't do it.
They probably didn't have the money.
Well, yeah, there was a payment program, but the point is that's how it was emanated. But the FCC is about RF. They control the RF, you know, and I think, you know, I looked at this document they issued. This pretty scary document on, you know, on what they want the cities to do. I don't pretend to be an attorney, but I sat there and I looked at this thing and I said, wow, this is for a court. I mean, it's crazy, you know, what they're thinking of here. But they haven't had a success.
There are 13 entities that are actually appealing the ruling.
Yeah.
It may take up to a year to see what comes of that,
yeah.
But you know, it could be overturned in total. It might be modified. I think, you know, it's anyone's bet, but I think it will be changed to some extent because it is overreaching.
Yeah,
and there's so many laws that it touches on states versus federal rights and utilities rights.
I got the feeling they were regulating my toilets in my house. It's like they're how many flushes. It's like, wow. Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
I'm gonna, go ahead, Andy, and then.
Yeah, it is pretty bad. It strips municipalities from a lot of their rights to leverage their public assets and get due compensation. The bigger issue is, you know, streamlining the shot clock. It also removes, you know, not only the limited the lease value or license fee for the small cell attachment, it also packaged in the permitting fees in that 270 suggested rate.
Yeah.
But there are many cities that we're currently working with, and we're coming up with what we believe is the true rate. And cities, if you read the law, or not law, if you read the ruling does say that if cities can justify the rates that they're charging, then it's indisputable. But the cities have to come up with the rationale for what they believe the pole is worth. And so we're working those formulas right now. And so far we've gone well past the 270.
Yeah.
We're now upwards in the 450 to 525 ranges when you throw with all the depreciation elements into a pole.
Andy, do you still have something to throw?
Yeah, I just want this kind of has been mentioned several times, so I don't think the conversation should be about the technology per se. We have a vision, broadband, and what we're talking about is the conversation we've been having for 150 years of the country is infrastructure. And all the power is in infrastructure, so everything we're talking about is infrastructure. And so that has to be our core, you know, bedrock philosophy of what we're looking at. Who controls it? How do we make sure that we don't get screwed in 20 years because we don't manage it correctly?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'd like to, you know, go wrap this up, but Kevin, did you have something you want to add?
No, I think agreeing with that and you know, I think it's been mentioned earlier, the whole, I think the push of what we're trying to do here is however we, you know, deliver broadband or high-speed internet to our communities, whatever flavor that is, you know, 5G is just a piece of that puzzle. And I think, you know, certainly the group can say we're looking at that, you know, assuming that and so on, but it's just one piece of how it's gonna get done.
Right.
You know, and I think, we just said too, I think infrastructure is key to making this all happen, you know, and that kind of gets to this fourth utility model, how we get that input, as much of that infrastructure deployed as we can.
Well,
Bill, I just had one more thing I wanted to say, I'm sorry.
Sure, go ahead.
I'll keep this short. So I wanted to just emphasize again, for those cities that don't have a big ones policy or big ones practice, you really should consider doing something about that, and alerting your public works people. When these small cell permits come over the counter for mounting these on traffic signal poles or streetlight poles, undoubtedly they will be followed by an encroachment permit to put fiber in the ground. And now is the time to act, and because now is the opportunity to joint trench with these companies as they lay their conduit for fiber to backhaul small cell. You should be getting conduit in the ground as well.
Agreed.
I'm pretty overwhelmed with all this conversation. I mean, we started off this meeting and we talked about CPUC in rural areas and what we were paid to do. And we did that in about 10 minutes. And then the discussion that's followed is, you know, when you talk about community networks, streetlights, utility poles, 5G, big ones. I mean, this is an ongoing conversation with many fronts. And to talk about this once a month is hardly adequate in terms of the problems we're trying to solve locally. So I'm continuing to, in terms of where this group's going and what we're going to do, you know, we've got to figure out how we're going to organize ourselves and the messages we're going to put out, you know, how we're going to develop these strategies to do all these things. So, I mean, it's great. It's very important. Storming, forming, norming, and performing. You know, we've got a lot of storming, but we're also approaching that point of forming before we norm and perform. And so this is it's good, but let's start normalizing.
Bill, would it make sense, I think the idea was bantied around a little while ago, would it make sense to have the carriers come in?
I thought that was a great suggestion.
And
Absolutely.
I was with the person last week from Sprint, who's their 5G guru, you know, in charge. I asked her if I told her about our consortia, she was happy to hear of it. I asked her if she could provide us with some information, which she gave me what she had in her bag. I can share the few here, but I asked for, you know, several hundreds to be sent to you. You'd be receiving them. But in any event, she said yes, absolutely, she would be happy to we just, you know, tell her how much time to come in and talk to us. Or she would hold a webinar.
Yeah.
Maybe that makes sense, we get a lot more people on it and they can do it, you know, ad hoc. So, but yeah, and I suspect Verizon, you know, would do the same.
Yeah.
Can I talk about a very positive thing about IoT, 5G?
Sure.
For a moment. So, this is something I learned recently. A big push to IoT is transportation. And it will be the biggest consumption, potentially, of cloud storage, et cetera. They were forecasting that for every vehicle that's connected, it will somehow consume about 70 terabytes a year in data storage. I mean, it's an insane amount of data, and it's all going to be transmitted through the internet. But a byproduct of this is more efficiency and less cars on the road. So within the next 5, 10 years, let's say 10 years, based on what Jory's saying, that's not gonna get deployed, we're gonna see less vehicles on the road, but more consumption of transportation. So it's kind of an interesting shift, whereas the conversation is, well, there's concerns about what 5G is gonna do to health and safety and environment, but then there's another byproduct that it's gonna take vehicles off the road. So, and I realize that's not what the Broadband Consortium is all about,
But it is, in that, as much as we've had this 5G discussion, you know, I think on the last miso I put together some words of we'd had coffee, and the whole idea of using technology and broadband to take cars off the freeway is a conversation that's very important. You know, we ought to figure out how we can create a pilot for telework and telecommuting, it's very hard to add more lanes to freeways right now.
Right.
And yet the technology is at our disposal, and all we've got to do is change behavior of civic leaders and businesses.
Yeah, the studies on teleworks have been around for 30 years.
Yeah,
I mean,
and that is an important conversation we as a consortium could do.
Yeah.
The only, I'm sorry, so the jury's really still out on what we expect to happen when we do get to autonomous vehicles. I mean, there is a lot of belief, in fact, that we will need at least the amount of space we have out there today, because people will be able to be so mobile in whatever vehicle is there. We expect what we call vehicle miles traveled to increase substantially because of the ease of being mobile. Now, you may not be because of the car you drive that you own, it may be some sort of shared ownership, but we are all going to be utilizing the transportation system at a far greater. We don't know this yet, but there's a belief that with the ease of mobility, we will be much more mobile, and we will be but we will be on the road much more than we are today. We may make different choices as to when we travel. We may not be stuck in congestion. Smarter cars can move closer together because you don't have human interaction. But there are a lot of questions about what that is going to translate to, but I can tell you, as we're designing for improvements to the 101 freeway corridor right now, we are anticipating a not massive growth in vehicle miles traveled, but a decent growth because of, even with the changing in technology. So, and it could be wrong. I mean, this is the other thing, we just don't know how we're gonna do it.
Well, you look back in history, in the 1920s, it cost about $25 a year to keep a car, and it cost about $200 a year to keep a horse. So as the economy of scale changes and the options get to be more viable at a lower rate, it makes sense that people would expand their horizons and go, further and farther.
So yeah, but again, we also have more capacity on the system because we have smarter vehicles that, I think I told the story at the last summit. I mean, we experienced the ability to put 200 more cars on a freeway per lane per hour. Wow. With the advent of anti-lock braking systems. That very basic technology to us today allowed us to go from 1,800 vehicles per hour a mile lane to a little over 2,000. Obviously autonomous vehicles are going to take that to a whole nother level to create capacity on an existing system, which is why we believe we can widen the 101 freeway and not have to buy more property, because we're going to find the capacity with the smart vehicles being able to be quite close together versus giving ourselves several hundred feet between vehicles.
NASCAR.
So, exactly. Sorry. You'll just be drafting. Teslas will be drafting.
That's so cool. Thank you for that.
Sure.
So we have
put it farther up.
Yeah, right. Understood. No, that's also part of it. That is absolutely part of it. Is that within the Caltrans right of way anymore, any improvement comes with fiber.
Good idea.
So there's 5 minutes left. I want to just, if there's anything that we haven't talked about that we need to talk about before we adjourn, I wanted to provide you that opportunity.
Education and marketing. How do we educate the masses? How do we educate the people that make the decisions, the city councils, and how do we market that to them?
Well, let me get through the next month of proposal writing, then I'm going to come back to our summit. And that's probably how we'll answer that question.
No, I think his question also is, really, how do we get more people that don't come to these meetings to understand what we're trying to do? And I think if we start working together towards promoting it, you know.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm happy to see that, 5G is in my neighborhood so prevalently, because I experience the gist of symptoms that people experience.
For those of you up north, Mike, Tim, we're so glad that you're logged in, because, you know, it's a great conversation down here, but your perspective is important, and, you know, we wanna have the same conversation up north as well.
Absolutely. That's been great, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bill, for all you're doing, appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Any other comments here before we adjourn?
Very interesting topics of discussion today. I appreciate everybody's indulgence with my comments.
Is it reasonable for, George to get that AB 1366 data to us? Maybe if there's something we need to or should do to talk to our representatives, I'd be happy to do so. So maybe Bill, you can circulate that.
Yeah, we'll certainly do that.
Yeah, Bill has it in his email.
Okay. We'll do that. Any other comments as we go to the order? All right, everybody, thank you so much. We'll keep in touch.
I just